That's some good stuff. Hey there. Welcome to the stream today. I'm going to do a little stream about which editor you should use first for coding. And this is because I have been trying to make the decision about what editor to use on the stream as I go forward with the rest of the beginner boots. And I think it's a big topic. I've never covered it before. I've covered little pieces of it all over the place, but I've never tackled the topic at large, the huge topic. So before I even let the crew of hecklers and debaters and, you know, outlying intelligent people to come on here and like make all their cases for whatever thing they use, I just wanted to talk to you for a second about you making your own decision about what to use. And God knows I'm a very opinionated guy and I have a lot of specific opinions about this. But I wanted to just go ahead and run it all by you. First of all, though, let me just make one change. There we go, much better. Cheers. A little bit of spiked coffee there to get me through this. Actually, chai. The topic of an editor is a really controversial topic. Everybody argues about it all the time. Everybody's right, everybody's wrong. And the bottom line is that it comes down to what is the best tool for you. And so today we're going to talk about 3 specific types of editors, types of tools that you can use for editing code. A lot of these editors you could use just to edit whatever you wanted to. And they fall into 3 categories. IDEs, what they call individual development environments, lightweight graphic editors, and terminal-based editors. That, you know, well, if you know me at all, you know terminal editing is my preference. But I want to talk about all of them so that you can kind of speak intelligently about which one is the best to use for a particular task. And if you're watching this video live stream right now, you're probably going to see a graphic for a while, but there's going to be other graphics inserted in here to talk about this. So the first editor I wanted to talk about is one called Visual Studio, and we can go ahead and look at where to get this and everything. So Visual Studio. Let me just put my thing back on. Visual Studio is the default for most C++ development on Windows and from Microsoft. And you just do the search for Visual Studio, you'll find it. It's really important that you understand that Visual Studio is not Visual Studio Code, and we're going to talk about that. That's under the lightweight category. This is a great tool for what it's designed to do, which is largely work on very big Microsoft applications. And some people swear by it and they use it all the time. I hate it. I've had to use it on occasion. And it's a fun fact. There's somebody who did some analysis on it from Microsoft who discovered that something like 50,000 lines of code are never even used in the code base. It's the epitome of Microsoft bloat, but it is a mandatory tool if you're going to be doing anything in C# or C++ for Windows. It's just really not worth trying to do it in any other way. You certainly can use other editors for that, but it's really not worth attempting that. And so that's one of your choices. If you're going to be doing Unity development or you're going to be doing something C#, you might want to pick this editor if you're going to use that. There's another popular editor that's been around for a long time. By the way, Visual Studio has been around forever. Another editor that's been around for a while is called Jetbrains. It's actually so much an editor as it is a company. IntelliJ is JetBrains has become famous for specifically their IntelliJ editor, which has been around since the 90s. It's a really good one. But this is your decision whether you want to use this or not. Personally, if I think they're the ones who did PyCharm. This is a little bit lighter than a traditional, integrated development environment than some of the other ones that are out there. But it is a thing that you can use, and you can give it some consideration. There's Python developers who absolutely swear by PyCharm. I would never ever use it, but that might not be you. I want to say there's another one in that branch that's called Goland, which is, the other thing too is you get language specific IDEs. Yeah, there we go. Goland is the JetBrains IDE. That this is one I've heard rave reviews on. TJ Holloway-Chuck really loves it. One of the most famous converts from Node to Go. He uses it. He was raving about it. A lot of people really like it. It's got great theming and everything. And frankly, if you're going to be developing in a specific language, in fact, somebody who recently got a job with a company that does Go development, this is their go-to editor. It's not mandated, but it's really encouraged that you use it. I happen to be a fan of the idea of having, if you're going to have a graphic editor, that you have a graphic editor that's highly customized for your whatever it is that you're developing. And so this would be one that you might consider if you're going to do Go development. PyCharm is that way. And frankly, JetBrains as a company has made kind of a business out of creating editors for specific languages. The first being IntelliJ, which was a worldwide hit. I believe IntelliJ then went on to become the standard native application development tool for Android. And with 39% of all internet traffic going to Android phones with Chrome, that's a significant choice. So if you're going to pick an editor, you might want to consider JetBrains for that. There's one that I have to mention that I absolutely despise, mostly because I had to use it. I was forced to use it. This got really popular. It's called Eclipse, and there would be groans in the audience if they could hear them right now. Eclipse is probably one of the most notoriously bloated and horrible integrated development environments on the planet, as far as I'm concerned. However, it is everywhere. There's an Eclipse Foundation. It's been everywhere since the 90s because Eclipse got really popular because it was really the first substantial Java editor written in Java. And Eclipse itself has gone on to be embedded in applications because of its framework. IBM, for example, same time, their chat client is an entire Eclipse instance with Java built in. It's one of the most bloated pieces of crap I've ever used. And not just that, but Lotus was the same way. And you see a lot of things around that still use Eclipse for lots of reasons, and you're likely to encounter it if you're doing any Java development. And particularly even in Minecraft, if you're doing Minecraft development, if I had a choice and I was going to be doing Java development, which I would never choose to do, I would probably be reaching for IntelliJ over Eclipse. But again, you might not have the choice. And Eclipse is super famous for having all the things integrated into it, and it's really popular with enterprises. So they've developed a lot of enterprise tools that use it. And a lot of times they'll mandate that you use it. When I was at IBM, I had to use Eclipse, and I figured out ways to get around that and use VI under the hood so that I could just use Eclipse for the things that Eclipse had to be used for like committing code into the source tree and stuff like that. So again, those are the only individual development environments I'm going to cover. Just to give you an introduction to them so you know about them. This is beginner boost material here. So I'm assuming that you don't know anything about editors. You maybe have heard somebody say you need to learn this and you need to learn this, and hopefully this will help you make your own decision. The next category of editors was actually the lightweight text editors. There was something of a revolution started by Sublime, and it was the first. So I talked about this before. I'm doing it again though because I feel like it's important to do it in a more succinct way. So Sublime Text is still, I believe, the fastest visual lightweight editor in class. There's still people who really love it, but it has fallen out of favor for three main reasons. The first main reason is that it's highly proprietary. You can use it, but you're supposed to buy it. Number two, you can't extend it, and there's almost like yelling at each other flame wars in the support forums because the person who maintains it, which I shall not name, doesn't listen to anybody, does whatever he wants, and the people who are trying to expand it and do their own thing just can't, and they're just so frustrated that this product, which was so great, is just completely not available to anybody to extend or use. Now you can write Python plugins and things like that. A lot of people do that. And the fourth thing is it's all Python. It's Python and C, and so extending it is even if you could, it would be really tough to do it. I think it's C++ actually, but fastest editor on the planet for a very long time in the graphics category. short of like really simple ones, and we'll get to those too. This is a little bit of a cross between, whatever the editor is on your computer, and I don't need to tell you about, Notepad or Simple Text or whatever the editor is that comes on your computer, just a plain old text editor. Which, by the way, Jennifer recommends in learning web design that you just use that, and that's actually how I learned web design in 95 or so. I actually coded my first HTML using Simple Text on a Mac, and that's totally fine. It didn't have any syntax highlighting. It was a whole world opening up to me after that point. So don't feel bad if that's all you know. And if you have Pop! OS or Linux of any kind, the built-in graphic editor is pretty dang good, the text editor. So we're gonna stick with those. They're all lightweight, but that's really ultra lightweight, right? So in between ultra lightweight, which is just text editing, had nothing to do with code, and the big fat behemoth IDEs, you have this lightweight brand of editor called Sublime Text, which is the first one. And I'm very quickly going to go through the history of that. So after Sublime Text came out and had its problems that I mentioned, people ran to Atom. And Atom was GitHub's answer to Sublime. It was an editor developed by GitHub before they were consumed by Microsoft, and it was designed entirely to use JavaScript. In fact, the entire Electron API, which people love to bag on now because it is responsible for Eclipse, Slack, God, however many more. I mean, there's so many applications that have Electron built into them now. And Electron is the framework that was built to build Atom primarily. Oh boy, what did I just search for? Electron. So we have Electron here. I probably should say engine or something. No, what should I say? Framework. Electron gets a really bad black eye these days because so many people make very simple applications that have an entire Electron framework built into them. Electron, just so you're wondering, is a combination of the Chrome web browser and a web server that by default I think is Node, and the stuff to talk between the two. So it's basically like you have a little miniature web server and web browser all built into one. And that way you don't, so it's kind of like a web application. So you're going to hear a lot more about Electron. I actually have done a video on Electron. If you can go search it up on my YouTube. But it's important you understand that Electron was created to make Atom. And as soon as Electron came up, everyone's like, well, maybe we can do better. So, and it was JavaScript. It was really slow compared to Sublime. It's still slow compared to Sublime. But Atom was really lighter than the IDEs. And it was extensible using JavaScript, which made it really popular with a lot of people really fast. Still really popular, actually. And then you have Brackets. So Brackets was Adobe's answer to this. They said, hey, we want to make one. And I'm almost positive that it's running off the Electron editor, but the Electron framework, but I can't confirm that right now. And it basically the same idea. It's just Adobe style, different approach. Adobe, I guess, wanted to do their own for some reason. I've never met anybody who uses Brackets who's not a big diehard Adobe fanatic, and you know what I'm talking about. They are there, but that exists, and so that's one of those. And then sometime after that, Microsoft decided to get into the game, and they said, you know what, let's make Visual Studio Code, VS Code. So that's code.visual studio, I think it is. Yeah. code.visualstudio.com. Now this, they had an opportunity to really clean things up, but they didn't. And they named it Visual Studio Code instead of Visual Studio. And this has created crazy confusion for beginners. I don't know how many times somebody's downloaded Visual Studio instead of Visual Studio Code because the icons are similar. They wanted to just carry on their branding and maybe, make people think that Visual Studio is actually not the horrible bloated piece of crap that it is. And so they added code on the front of it. And it's really tough, but just make sure you go to code.visualstudio. This is the #1 editor on the planet right now, hands down, by every measure. This is where most code is being written in. Microsoft does know developers, and they're pretty good at making editors, and so they did a lot of things that weren't very Microsoft-y at the time. In fact, you could argue that this was the beginning of the new Microsoft. under Sanjay that really embraces open source, and as far as we know, and they released this to the world and said, here's our version, and we're using Electron, and ours is faster than Atom, and we still use some techniques that are the same. They have their own plugin architecture, which is very, very rich right now, and people go crazy over this thing. There's people who love date completion. I despise that, and there's it's just really popular with a lot of people. This is the editor that I usually have beginners use. So if you're just coming to the boost for the first time and you've never done any editing and you don't particularly want to, rack your brain learning a more difficult editor that I'm going to talk about in a second, this is the editor that I recommend you pull out. Either this one or Atom. Chances are, though, that VS Code is going to be more fun for you out of the gate. One of the things that VS Code does very, very well is it integrates with other services that that Microsoft now owns. Microsoft bought GitHub, and that meant that they also bought the Atom editor. It's open source, but and they bought control of VS Code, and they got all the 10 million developers or so that were committing to GitHub all the time, and that's very good. $7.8 billion they paid, I believe, and that was a very controversial decision, and that was after GitLab came out, but I'm going down kind of a rabbit hole there. But just understand that this is still under Microsoft's control. The future looks pretty bright for Visual Studio Code because Microsoft does control it, other than the fact that they're probably going to bloat it out like they do everything else. It is integrated very tightly with GitHub, which is the world's leading source repository, even though it's not my favorite. And that's a separate conversation. I use GitLab for everything. And so I'm going to kind of conclude on that, but for one other thing. Visual Studio Code has Microsoft telemetry that's embedded in it that you have to actively go in and find and turn off, and nobody does by default. So I can't recommend enough that you at least give VSCodium a try. VSCodium, and you can go find it. It's actually, if you're using Pop! OS like me, you can just search for it, and this is what it looks like. It's exactly the same. We're not going to run it right now, but so that's what we're looking at. And you can download VSCodium. All VSCodium it's exactly the same project. Thank God for open source, right? It is VS Code in every way. It's just had all of the telemetry, the tracking and privacy violation and stuff that it is activated by default in Microsoft's tool. There are some things that don't work in it, I've heard, but for the most part, I think you're going to be fine to use this. I have not, other than the other day, I haven't given it a lot of work, but I have used VS Code for more than a year and a half. At one point, I was a total convert to VS Code, and I actually gave up my favorite editor of all time, Vim, for VS Code for a good year and a half, and I did a video on that. Ultimately, though, I concluded that even a lightweight text editor for me is just too heavy and too slow, and people take great exception with that. But I am not a graphic editor guy. I never have been, because the terminal is always going to be faster. I could argue all day that the terminal on every level is faster than any graphic application, period, just from the trips that you have to make over to the mouse all the time. And however, to use a terminal editor today is it's a craft. You have to practice it, just like the piano or something. You can't just jump in and use it. It's pretty hard. So let's shift our gears now to the terminal editors, and I want to talk about those and a little bit of the history of the terminal editors. The terminal editors are my favorite. And after that year of VS Code, it was my own people, then my own community reminded me that it was still faster to start up files and everything with VI, and it's just better. So based on that, we're going to go back and I'm going to pull up the chat. I'm sure we're going to have all kinds of people in the chat talking right now, but before we do that, I just want to tell you about them. I think I can probably go pull up. I have to give you a quick history on the editors here. So let me go back to the title screen for a sec. All right. So when it comes to terminal editors, you have to go back into the history of terminal editor and know what a terminal is. So first of all, a terminal is the thing that you get when you fire up. I'm firing up one right now so you guys can see. So this is a terminal editor. And I'm going to show you this. Actually, give me a second. I'm going to make it a big screen I'm going to change this one to be so that it hides stuff. And I'm going to go into preferences. And the thing about terminals is that you can set their colors and everything, and I just want to set that to something that's very readable for right now, instead of the transparency, just so you can read it. I mean, I love transparency, don't get me wrong, but it's a little bit hard to read sometimes. All right, so we'll do that, and then we'll bring this guy, make this thing full screen. All right, so actually, yeah, let's do that. So then if I bring us back to here, you see, you just get a plain terminal. There's nothing going on. It's just a terminal, and terminals can be really scary if you don't know about them, you haven't used them before, but they're very powerful. And we're going to talk about terminals at another time. We're not going to talk about terminals right now, but I did want to introduce you to different kinds of terminals. So the first terminal is ed, and it's actually, you could argue that it was the first terminal ever made. X, I think, it predates it, but and ed is a line editor, and I mean ed like this, ed, and it lets you, like, you can set in commands, and those commands will adjust each line of a file that's coming in. And I don't want to spend time with any of the editors showing you, because I know it'll take too much time. But the second editor after ed was an editor called VI, and VI stood for Visual Mode of X, or ed. And so it was, the other one just allowed you to change one line at a time, and VI lets you have like a whole screen, and to just let you see what that looks like. So, I mean, where are we right now? We could probably do temp sum.md, and you see you get this screen. This is actually Vim, and we're talking about that, but you get this screen, and you can type stuff in here and save it and such, right? And so that was visual mode. But you see how it took out the whole screen. So VI, and actually there's another, I don't think I have it installed, but let me do this really quick. Install NVI, and I got to do my password there, and there we go. We'll install this really fast. Aren't packages great? Package systems. All right, so now I can do the same thing. I can do NVI, and this is NVI is the original VI. There is no, you can't get the original VI usually these days. It's really hard to find unless you're using a really old computer. Most computers come with a command called VI, which is aliased to a modern version of it called Vim, VI improved. But the original VI is represented in a program called NVI, not to be confused with neovim. And we'll talk about Vim and neovim in a second. So NVI is a bug for bug compatible version of the original VI that came on Unix systems from the dawn of time. And it continues to be the default editor right here on BSD Unix, which is a different, kind of operating system we're not talking about today. But all this terminal stuff originated with Unix, actually Minix, and we can go back, but for all intents and purposes, Unix was the very first time. And, in college campuses, this was sort of used, and then Linux came about. This isn't a terminal history class right now, but we'll talk about that later. So the question comes up, well, so what should I use? Should I use VI? And, or should I use Vim? So the next generation of editors that came out after this was a thing called Vim, and Vim is just improved VI, and then in an attempt to improve upon that, yet another version of Vim came out called neovim, and rumor has it there's another one called Space Vim now, which I am not interested at all. I'm not interested at all in neovim, and I actually strongly discourage you from using it. For reasons that I can describe. I can send you to my blog post about why you might not want to use it. Vim, however, is my favorite, and because Vim gives you all the power of customization of your command line terminal, and why would you use a terminal on the command line? The single biggest answer to that is, in the case of VI or Vim, is because you can fully integrate your computer's terminal power into your editor. And while you can pull up a terminal in VS Code, that is not necessarily the case, right? It's a lot harder to do. You can do it, but it's not as obvious. So, if you learn VI and you don't learn, or Vim, and you don't learn how to integrate the shell commands and be able to write really quick little shell scripts in order to do things, or you don't learn how to use macros, which I took a long time to do because I was a sort of a VI purist for a very long time. You haven't really learned Vim, and you're not going to really understand a lot of its advantages. You'll just be frustrated because you can't exit, you can't escape, which is a big joke out there. But if you do allow yourself to do those things, you can make the most powerful editor you could imagine. In fact, when combined with a really amazing shell like Bash and a terminal multiplexer, which allows you to split your screen up into pieces, like tmux, you have what I believe is a far more powerful individual development environment without the bloat. It's the most efficient way to do editing of all time. Not only that, but it works everywhere. And so before we go to the other terminal options, I just want to say that VI is installed on VRVim is installed on every Unix and Linux system for the last like 50 years. And so if you are going to be in a situation where you just need to attach to a cloud machine with, headless, that means it doesn't have a graphic user interface, and you want to be able to apply what you're going to do there, you just want to learn Vim or VI. And you just do, because that way you can be effective anywhere. If you're going to be a hacker, you really need to learn VI. If you're going to be a hacker, you need to learn Ed also, because a lot of times when you break into a system, you don't even have that big fancy screen. All you have is one line at a time. And therefore Ed comes in really handy because Ed allows you to edit files. There's other ways to edit files, but Ed, that's a really strong case for you to learn Ed. If you're just like wanting to be a web developer, or you're wanting to just write, some Go code for some reason, or for whatever, edit pod files for Kubernetes or something, that is, not necessarily a reason to learn Ed, but VI doesn't hurt because it works everywhere. But that brings us to the next option. But speaking of defaults, some time ago, the Linux Foundation and all the Linux people decided to get rid of VI as the default. They didn't take VI off, but they stopped making VI the default editor, and they started using something called Nano, which I actually despise, but I understand why people need to use it to get going. The reason that I despise this editor, and you see me using my just, like writing and then pushing backspace and stuff like that. This Nano is, by the way, is a newer version of Pico, which has been around for a while. And these got really popular because they were used for mail processing back in the day when you would use a terminal for mail. So people remember them. And it is definitely more intuitive to a beginner, but you really have to span the arrow keys. You can't navigate around. You can't really integrate your shell. You sort of can. And the most annoying thing of all here is that it encourages you to use Control X to exit, and the see all these things down here that begin with a caret. Those are all control things, and I just really don't like the use of control characters. But I've been overruled. Everybody on the planet thinks Nano should be the default editor on Linux now, and now it is. To be fair, sometimes you would do something that was really important, like you'd be editing, a scheduler file in cron job, and you would go to edit it and it would throw you into VI. And if you didn't know VI, you were in trouble because now you couldn't exit because you didn't know how to exit. There's no help. There's no menu. You couldn't get out of it. And that's like a long time, joke in the world of VI. So that's why Nano is there. I can't in good conscience recommend Nano if you're going to use a terminal. Because the whole reason for using the terminal is to take advantage of the terminal and its integration with the shell. And so that brings us to yet another option, which is very popular with academics and hardcore coders and Linus Torvalds, who made Linux, and many other really substantial developers, and that's Emacs. And I actually do not like Emacs. I played around with it. I was Emacs curious for a while. The reason before I get into Emacs, I don't even think I could operate it. I don't even know if it's on here. Let me check and see. Nope. It's not even on here. I have to install. I'm not going to install. I'm not going to waste your time. I would be totally lost using it. Some people swear by it. People joke and say, Emacs isn't an editor, it's an operating system. And the reason for that is because Emacs was developed primarily by a guy named Richard Stallman, who wrote most of the C code for the utilities that you use along with Linux, the GNU core utilities. He's the guy who says you should call everything GNU Linux instead of Linux, because he believes his contribution outweighed the Linux kernel itself, as well as everybody else's contribution to the whole Linux system, which I totally disagree with. But he, made Emacs, and Emacs is still popular. Linus Torvalds uses something called Micro Linux, apparently. And the attraction from Emacs is that it can be customized. It's basically the heaviest possible terminal application you can run for editing anything. And it's not just editing. You can change your file system. They've got so many plugins to make it do so many different things. They've even got stuff that makes it behave like VI if you want. And for some people, they really love that. You got to understand that was a thing when terminals were the only thing in the house. Emacs was like really powerful. I mean, it was really powerful. Back then, there was no tmux. You couldn't split panes up. You had screen, which allowed you to have different windows and cut and paste text back and forth. But a tool like Emacs at the time I could see how it would be really compelling, particularly because there was no network yet. So, even before networking existed, Emacs existed, right? So, but nowadays, when we pick a terminal editor, I believe you're picking a terminal editor because you want to be fast, you want to integrate the shell commands, and you want to be able to use your editor anywhere as fast as possible. You don't want to wait up for things to start up. And by the way, that means that you can't take your big fancy Emacs configuration with you. You've got to know how to edit files on remote systems without all that. It doesn't take very much to copy over that to a system, but you might not even have permissions to do that in certain enterprise environments. You have to have a change ticket to do that. And so that's my take on it. Becoming proficient with VI first and then Vim, allowing yourself to use the extra Vimisms, which I finally gave in on, allows you to be, have the efficiencies of Emacs locally, and build basically an IDE by combining Bash, Vim, and tmux. But it also allows you to use the same fingers and operations, muscle memory on any system anywhere. And Emacs doesn't allow that. You'd have to install it, as you just saw, on all those systems to be able to use it. So I believe that's a big strike against Emacs for anyone who wants to use more than one computer. If you're going to spend you're an astrophysicist, and you're going to just work on one computer the whole time, and you want to be able to write your own plugins and everything and all this stuff, and then Emacs might be your option there. And by the way, another reason to use VI is because the bindings for VI are built into everything. So the use of HJKNL for navigating through the history is the thing, right? And by default, the terminal in Linux is set to Emacs mode. So it's as if you're interacting with an Emacs session. But if you do set-OVI, you can use that. You can use VI mode. There is no nano mode or anything like that. And you'll come to really appreciate that, because your fingers will memorize things from the terminal that carry over into your editor. And that then goes into like terminal browsing. Like when I browse, when I browse the website, I'm using one hand and I'm using the same VI navigation keys, because those are, once again, built in. And it's very common to encounter, terminal software that has Vim bindings. You can even do a thing called Vimium, which can work in Chrome as a plugin and allow you to navigate your graphics browser without touching your mouse at all. You can just stay there and do VI sorts of things. I'm sure similar things exist for the Emacs kind of people, but as I've said from the beginning, there's different stages here. And if you're just starting out and you don't know what to use and you don't want to use text edit anymore, the first pick I would say would be VS Code. It's very intuitive. It uses the mouse. It's what you see is what you get. But if you want to, move into the terminal, you're eventually going to have to move into the terminal. There's just not very much, not even in the web development front end world, there's not very much that doesn't force you at some point to go onto a terminal to do something. And I'm not going to go into all those reasons you would have to use a terminal, but these days using a terminal is sort of mandatory skill for a technologist, and particularly in the cloud environment. And because it's just ubiquitous, it's just everywhere. It gives you so much power. And so if that is true, and you have to use it, I think you might as well learn the best editor for the terminal on any terminal so that you can be productive no matter what. And if you want to take it up a notch and use Emacs, some people use Emacs and VI. There's a couple of really great BSD people in here who use, they'll use Emacs and they'll also use VI depending on what system they're on. And that's only 2 terminal editors to learn. That's not too bad. There's no way you're going to be able to do a VS Code on that. By the way, just say no to all of the remote editing crap that's coming out in VS Code and all these graphic editors that are claiming to be able to integrate remote file editing. What they're doing is under the hood, they're copying down a file copy, allowing you to edit it, and then they're synchronizing up that copy to the server. There's so many things that can go wrong with that. I just can't even begin to comprehend all the possible things that could go wrong with that. And if you are in charge of editing files on a remote system, first of all, why are you doing that, right? You should be staging it. If you are somehow doing that, one of the legitimate reasons to be doing that would be responding to an emergency, as I did many times, working as a system administrator. And when you have to remotely connect to a system and edit files there, the last thing you want in the way is a visual editor that's run by Microsoft. I mean, I can't even begin to imagine the terror of trying to be a system administrator and do that. So, just if that's where you're headed in cybersecurity and system engineering and even full stack development as opposed to just front end engineering, then I would eventually move off of VS Code. You can still use it, if you want to do big web projects. It's really good for that. But if you're going to start getting serious about development, C development is pretty much all on the command line. That's kind of the culture. You can do it in VS Code, but you're using make files and all this stuff. You're going to need to learn the terminal. So I would say probably 70 to 80% of all the careers in technology involve the terminal, and of those careers, probably 50% of those careers involve using a terminal on multiple computers without having an editor installed on them that you install. And therefore, my justification is learn VI and then learn Vim. And if you want to do that, I will do videos on how to do that, how to learn VI. A little bit of a spoiler here, though. If you want to just jump right in with VI, you can actually go read a little guide I made called VI Survive. So you can go rwx.gg/VI Survive. And this is just the minimum you need to know to get around to VI. And this does, or Vim, and this does make use of the arrow keys. Because if you're using nano and you want to get started with VI and not start with nano, this is the way to do it. This is the way to do it. rwx.gg/VI Survive. And that'll talk you through how to just, use VI as if it were nano, and then you can slowly add on more skills. That's how VI learning works. I'll do different videos on VI specifically as part of the Terminal Mastery series, but I just wanted to do this one on editing. All right, so that concludes this video. I'm going to turn and take some comments. I'm sure the forums are full, or the comments are full of people raging about different things that I've said here. And as I've said all along, be your own person, be a critical thinker, do your own analysis for your own needs and make your own decision. Don't take my word for it. Don't take their word for it. Don't let any pedantic, argumentative jerk decide for you what's best for you. And that includes me, because I can be that guy. So you make your own decision, but taking a bunch of information, make an informed opinions, and be ready to change your opinion when you have new opinions, when you have new information. But don't let anyone shame you because you're using the wrong editor. And by the way, if I ever do that, I'm always joking, right? I have fun. We all have fun, but that's fine. That's the part of natural healthy debate. But just take that with a grain of salt when we do that. I'm going to turn to the chat now at potentially what will be my peril. So I'm going to put that on here. So here we go. Pico came with Pine. Oh yeah, Pico was Pine. Pine was the mail editor. No nano. Yeah, I made a thing about nano. Emacs always makes me picture Emac. Mendy, the problem with Emacs is the same as Eclipse. People are already making Emacs-based applications. Are they really? Didn't know that. When I browse the website, I'm using one hand. Yeah, I know that sounds pretty funny, doesn't it? PG just quoting. I walk into those things all the time. Obviously, I didn't mean it. I'm browsing a text-based website, so yeah, Text. You're Vimium. You're talking about Vimium. Okay. Why no neovim? Neovim is a disaster that never needed to be made, and has been completely superseded by all of the additions that Vim made. And I'm gonna just, if you want to get my full story on Vim, let me just on neovim. I can give that to you here. So if you go to Notepad or Noob, GVim, I'm not a fan of graphics Vim. Although somebody informed me the other day that you can interact with the shell using graphics GVim, but to me that defeats the whole entire purpose of using Vim at all. If you're using Vim, you want to integrate the shell, and if you're using Vim on Windows with no bash shell, I think it's a waste. So that's not the way God intended it to be used. Let's put it that way. And then you have keyboard shortcuts. Yes. Have Vim shortcuts. Yes. I like using the terminal, but never really use terminal editors for anything other than reading manual pages. Well, that's not an editor in the first place. You're not using an editor to read a man page. You're using a pager, like less or more. I think remote editing is sometimes used for working on a machine that is much more powerful for huge code bases or with specialized hardware. I could see that, right? That might be fine. That might be a use case for that. Otherwise, not a fan of that. Pretty calm here. Yeah. Are there good resources for learning via Vim? By the sounds of it, you can't just dive in. There are many, and I've listed them on RWX. I'm going to do a whole thing on that. RWX / I want to say tools editor Vim. I don't remember. Let me go check here. Boop, 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 boop. Let me see here. Can't find Vim. There we go. Editors, Vimgo, Vimisms. So there's your link. Well, I'll just do this. rwx.gg tools, editors, Vim. I have a number of things you can use there. The Vim tutor is probably the best, even though it's out of date. I would never use anything but the Vim that is managed by the original creator of Vim. One of the complaints against Vim, the reason NeoVim was created, is the two biggest complaints against it were it was not conducive to community development, which I believe is BS, and number two, that they didn't have concurrency, and that was immediately fixed. So if anything good came out of NeoVim, it was the pressure for Brom to add that, and he did. And I believe something as important as Vim needs to be managed by one person or two, and that's it. I've seen committees destroy applications, and I've actually put my advice about not using NeoVim out there. In fact, I could probably find that for you right now. The biggest one is all the things they just ripped out without even asking anybody. There's like tons of changes that they made. They didn't even ask anybody, but they made it so you can use plugins with Node. I mean, all of the technical and architectural decisions behind NeoVim are almost one after the other a testament to horrible technical design and architecture. And I cannot overstate that. I hate it. I hate it. I really hate it. It's just really bad. Hi.
I want you to come see.
I can't. I'm in the middle of an actual educational video, but I'll be right there.
Okay.
I'll be right there. Okay, so that's my my complaint against NeoVim, if you want to know. And so, all right, what else we got here? New follower here. Hey, how's it going? What editor can I use if I have to develop on a remote computer like a Linux cloud machine? VI. The end. I just made a case for that. Use VI or Vim. That's why you should learn it. And the way to learn that is use Vim Tutor. If you want to, you can use, eventually you can use Vim Genius online. There's Open, I think it's OpenVim, which is another one that'll kind of get you started on it. There's a number of them. They're all listed on the Vim Editor's URL that I posted. When it comes to graphical editors, I always have Notepad++ besides the other more powerful ones. It is just the fastest graphical one. Yeah, I agree. I mean, Notepad++ is really great. I still think Notepad++ I didn't mention at all. Notepad++ fits between Notepad and Sublime. I believe it is really fast. but it, and it is graphical. It's very intuitive because you're just using your mouse, and it's got a little bit of more oomph in it besides just a plain old notepad. Particularly, it understands UTF-8. That's the thing. So that's, you might want to give that one a try too. I know people that still love Notepad++, and I used it for a while, a long time ago. But I'm pretty much if I have to use a Windows machine, that would be the thing. But these days, Linux is so prevalent on Windows that I've got a Linux terminal at my fingertips. I don't need to use any Windows only kind of editor for any reason. Did I miss the 2020 dumpster? Yeah, it's gone. We'll do that again. I'm glad it was a hit. Which one? Yeah. And so, yeah, thanks for the 2020 dumpster. We'll come and do that again. I am going to wrap up the stream for right now. Thanks for participating in our little dialogue about this. If you have any specific questions that, you want to go into, ask them in the Discord. You can ask me directly if I'm available. But we have a whole Discord just for this kind of thing, asking questions, getting in there. But I really, really felt like I needed to go break this down because for the rest of or Vim, neovim, NVim plugin will be support. I felt like how you do when new NVim came out, but I'm seeing more and more NVim plugins these days. Yeah, no, they stink. If you're, first of all, okay, I'm glad you brought that up. If you are searching to use a Vim that allows a lot of plugins, if you're picking a Vim editor because of it uses more plugins or because it's prettier, you're picking it for the wrong reason. You might as well just use VS Code or a graphic editor at that point. And I strongly believe in that. If you're seeking to do plugins instead of integrating shell scripts, you're not doing it right, in my opinion. You're doing it wrong. Look, if you're going to reach for a plugin, at least before you reach a plugin, learn how to use VI properly. If you don't know how to use the exclamation point in VI, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, it's just making my point. You don't know how to use VI on Vim. You're not in a position to make a decision about stop using it because it doesn't have plugins. And you need to practice doing the standard way of using Vim integration into the shell before you start punting and looking for every plugin under the sun and picking a tool that will allow you to make a plugin in 50 different languages. Sometimes specificity is a thing. Sometimes you don't want 50 options. Sometimes you don't want to have a configuration file in 20 different formats. Sometimes you want limitations on your types. Sometimes you want strict typing. So all of those architectural principles apply to Vim. You don't want too much choice. You want the right choice. And that's why Python won over Perl, because it was one best way, right? So my biggest complaint against neovim is this idea that we should expand the crap out of it and put whatever we want in and rip out stuff that's been there for years. And it's not just because I'm an old guy. It's because the entire approach is broken. The entire architectural mindset of the neovim team is just totally borked. And that's my opinion on that. If you disagree, that's fine. Go use it and have fun. There's lots of really respectable, awesome people who disagree with me very strongly. Primegian comes to mind. Biggenbot comes to mind. These are great people, great human beings. I love them. I'm really glad that I get to count myself among the streamers with them. But there's no way I will ever be okay with neovim unless I'm presented with new information that contradicts what I've just told you. What I see them doing is bloating the crap out of Vim in ways that are unnecessary and defeat the purpose for Vim in the first place. The reason that you're picking Vim in the first place, above all, is ubiquity. You want to use VI everywhere. You want to be able to go here and use it. In fact, I feel guilty using some of my Vimisms, but I'm okay with it. And by that argument, you can almost say, well, fine, I'm going to use all the plugins I can, and I'm going to let myself go crazy as long as I remember the fundamental navigation elements of VI and stuff so that I'm effective on an AIX machine or a Solaris machine or anything else that I had to administer while I was being paid to administer machines. And those jobs still exist. So my point is that if, before you give in to the tendency to expand and bloat your stuff out for questionable reasons, at least consider using what's already there, and that includes learning shell integration. When you learn shell integration with the exclamation point, I call it VI magic. Here, go read this. RWXIGG, VI Magic will teach you what I'm talking about, the specific thing. When you understand how to use true VI Magic, then you're in a position to say, well, this plugin covers something I don't have. I want the Groovebox theme. I want whatever, I do have plugins. I use plugins, but I'm very picky about the plugins because they have to be downloaded on every system I'm going to use them on. You need to make really sure that you're using a plugin manager that can be turned off or disabled if the plugin manager is not on the system. And all of those are things that are not an option for NeoVim. If you use a NeoVim specific configuration, you've just blown away your ability to use that configuration on any remote system by default. You better have a damn good reason to do that if you picked Vim because you want to be able to use it on multiple systems. And I don't think there's ever a decent enough reason for that. Vim, however, is everywhere. So you can actually port you can SCP in one command your vimrc over to any other system, use that, edit your files over there without a problem. If you've used neovimisms in your vimrc and haven't done it properly, you've just blown away your ability to customize any remote system on the fly because you cannot install neovim on that cloud machine without approval from your higher ups for a change ticket. Just say no to neovim. I'm telling you, say no. Vim is the standard editor for this kind of thing. And if you do go with NeoVim, be damn sure you know what you're doing. Make sure you know how to use the shell. Make sure you know that those plugins need to be encapsulated in some vimrc code that keeps them from being unusable on a remote system. And if you don't know anything about what I just said, you have no business using NeoVim. But the reason I get so spun up about this is because they hear from somebody on some Twitch stream or somewhere that they should just go throw that on. They end up throwing it on and they destroy their ability to be a performant, administrator and developer on a remote system because somebody told them NeoVim was the thing that they should use. I spoke in my piece. I think it's probably enough for me. I think the plugins are an interesting aspect of how Vim has grown over the years. I agree. And I'm not, and Plug is amazing, right? Plug is, Plug is I wish that the native plugins within Vim were good enough, but they're not. And the plugin manager is amazing. It keeps all your plugins in a separate directory. If you look at my vimrc, by the way, I'll send that to you guys if you want to see it. It's in rwx.gg. I'm sorry, it's in my GitLab. So just go to RWX Live. RWXRob.live and click on GitHub or GitLab, and you can go to my .files and you can go find my vimrc if you want to spelunk it. And by the way, it is very common. It's a common rite of passage to steal somebody else's vimrc and to just use it and understand it. But make sure you go through the lines and get a sense of what it's doing because everybody's is highly customized. And it's kind of a rite of passage to be a terminal user to do that, along with, understanding your own bash RC. Not to mention a full-time hobby, just playing with your configuration. I cannot get enough of that. I constantly love tweaking my terminal config. It's really fun. I enjoy that more than messing with my operating system. People ask me all the time, well, what manager are you using? Window manager using? Goes, whatever one is going to get me tmux, because I don't care about the window manager. I have a pane. So there'll be other videos on that. I have already done some videos about it, but I'll be redoing them. These videos are all going to be edited, polished, and scrubbed and put up on Vimeo for subscription if you'd like. But the raw YouTube video that I just made here will remain standing for as long as YouTube allows it to stay here. And I really appreciate you guys coming by and spending some time here. And I'm going to go ahead and I think we made that through that pretty well, didn't we, guys? We didn't argue too much. I'm going to come back in 10-20 minutes and we're going to do some more web development.